I'm Rob Skeoch, and I've been privileged to have a darkroom in my home. So this is a purposely built room. We've had it for a few years, and I thought I'd give you a tour of what my darkroom looks like. Maybe yours is better, maybe yours is bigger, maybe yours is smaller. Mine is a permanent room, maybe yours is temporary. But I thought I'd give you a quick tour of how my workspace is. This is my favorite area. I love to go down to the darkroom, process film, nice and quiet, peaceful, make some prints. Wonderful way to spend some time. Now, as we enter into the darkroom, like, hey, I know I'm privileged to have this. Not everybody has a darkroom, and not everyone has a darkroom that they can leave set up. I understand all that, but let me show you what I have. The darkroom itself is split into two sides. I've got the enlargers on one side, and the sink and what I would call the tray area on the other. Now, a lot of people in this spot would have a large sink. Maybe it's like a stainless steel sink. And when we built this room, we thought, oh, we should get that, but they were just so expensive. You just couldn't do it. So what we've got is a flat counter, and usually I would put some towels down if I was going to be printing, and then I would put the trays on top of the towels. And then I do have a sink. Of course, you need a sink, but you don't need to have a giant stainless steel sink. It would be nice, but I just don't have it. Now, as far as trays go, I've accumulated over the years a lot of trays. You know, there was a time, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years ago, people were getting into digital and getting out of darkrooms, and they would just give you their darkroom stuff. Not the enlargers, you always have to pay for those, but people would give you their trays. So I've gotten a lot of trays for doing 8x10. That's probably what I print the most. If you were only going to buy one set, that's probably the most useful. I do have trays also for printing 11x14. They don't get that much use because I would probably use a bigger tray if I was doing that. But if you're doing 8x10, the 11x14 trays are nice just for washing and that. And then I've got trays for 16x20 and 20x24. So I don't print 20x24 all that often, but I do have a set of trays to do that. And I've got a lot of trays for 16x20. So again, I don't print 16x20 all the time, but I've got a lot of trays, more than you would need. You need some to wash, but a lot of times you might use a toner or you might use a two fix bath system. So I've got a lot of trays. And as I said, I didn't buy all these trays. A lot of them were given to me from photographers who they just, didn't need them anymore. Then I've got my sink area where I wash the stuff, and I do use one of these Kodak siphons. So you hook that up to the sink, and it puts fresh water in the tray and takes out some of the other water. So it's a Kodak siphon. I don't know if you can still get them, but they'd be on eBay used for sure. And in this area, I've got all my tongs. I've got a lot of tongs, enough for each tray to have a fresh tong. And I've got an area where I dry my resin-coated prints. So if I'm printing resin-coated, I wash them for a briefer period of time, and I stand them up here, and then they dry with this. I think these are Patterson drying area. There's a squeegee. I use a Patterson squeegee, and there's a bunch of the Patterson cylinders that I use to measure out the chemistry. So this is the wet side of the darkroom, as people call it. It's got the trays, it's got some cupboards, and it's got the sink. Now, if we just stay for a minute on the wet side of the darkroom, I've taken those trays away because this is also the area that I use for processing my film. So I've got a pretty good selection of steel reels. These are 35mm reels. I've got a bunch of those. And I've got a bunch of 120 reels, so if you're doing 120. And then these bigger tanks, they'll hold 4 rolls of 35mm or 2 120. And then I've got some of the 1 120 or 2 35mm. And then I've got some tanks that just hold 1 roll of 35mm. Some of them have plastic lids, some of them have the metal lids. I bought some of this stuff, but some of it was given to me and it lasts forever. So you accumulate it more than anything over the years. Now, the dry side of the darkroom might be more exciting. So what I've got is I've got a couple of safe lights. The one on the far left is actually to a timer. That's the timer I use to time how long my prints are in the developer for. So when I turn the timer on, say 1 minute or 3 minutes, the light actually goes out. And then when the light pops back on, I know that my timing is done, because sometimes you've got music going and or the fans are going or the enlarger's on and things like that. You don't always hear the clock tick down. I don't have the buzzers turned on. So I just use a safe light there and it pops on, and then the light brightens up the room a bit, and then I know that it's time to change the chemist or the print to the next chemical. Now, here I've got one paper safe. I generally keep that empty. You'll just make a mistake and you'll open it by mistake. So I keep that empty. These are the two main papers I have. I would have these from 5x7 up to probably 20x24 in stock. So the first one on the left is the Ilford multi-grade fiber base. So that's my main fiber base paper, Ilford multi-grade fiber base glossy. It's now called Classic. It's the latest version. And then I also have the Ilford resin coated, which is I have in 5x7 and 8x10. I don't print resin coated above 8x10. Now this enlarger here, this is the Leica V35. It was the latest edition that Leica did. So they made enlargers, different models over the years, but the V35 was the kind of the end of the road for them. And I just have it with a regular Graylab timer. So you set that, say, to 11 seconds. You turn it on, the enlarger lights up, and then it runs for the 11 seconds and the enlarger turns off. Now the V35, I bought this used for about $400. Now, of all the darkrooms I worked in professionally, I would say 3 or 4 of them had the V35 as their main enlargers. I worked at a newspaper, they had 8 of them. So the V35, they were a nice enlarger. They were about $7,000 new in the 80s, like in 1980 dollars, $7,000 in Canada, Canadian dollars. So that's the Leica V35. It is autofocus, and if you were doing a bunch of prints, maybe let's say you're printing used cars for a car ad, you could use the autofocus and just whip these things out. If you were doing a portfolio print, I would probably not use the autofocus. I would just focus it. The autofocus was great because as you move the enlarger up and down, a little cam adjusted the focus and it would stay in focus. But I wouldn't be doing portfolio style. I would just check it with a grain focuser. So that's the Leica V35, one of the nicest enlargers in the world. And like I said, I bought it used years ago for $400, but new they were $7,000, and that's just how things changed over the years. Now these are contact printing frames that I have. So I've talked about these before. These are ones that I never use. So this is for contact printing of 120, and this is for 35 mil here. This is for 8x10. It's really a printing frame, it's called. And then this is just a piece of wood with a piece of glass. And that's what I use most of the time. So if I was making contact prints, I would probably just use this. It's the easiest to use, quickest to use. And sometimes I use, if I'm doing 35 mil, I'll use the 35 mil Patterson one. And I have problems with the 6x6 Patterson one, so I never use it. And I hardly ever use the 8x10 contact printing frame because I hardly ever do contacts of 8x10 negatives. Now, of the two enlargers that I have, I absolutely use the Leica one the least. In fact, because I don't really do a lot of 35 mil, and it only works for 35 mil negatives. It's kind of set up right now for contact prints. So I know that at this height, it's a 7-second exposure for my contact prints. But if I was doing 35 mil more, I would definitely use it. I just haven't been doing that much 35 mil. So I tend to use the Saunders more. So this enlarger, this is a great enlarger, does 35 mil, 120, up to 4x5. Wonderful enlarger. This is a black and white head. So with this one, I can dial in the contrast. I'm not using a regular color head. I can dial in the contrast, and it just, the exposure time on the paper doesn't change as you change the contrast. It's a great product. This is a great enlarger. Now, one of the weird things about this enlarger is it has a fan. And when it came out, people thought a fan and an enlarger, the vibrations will make your pictures unsharp, but it hasn't been an issue. It's been a great enlarger. They're very popular. For if you're doing up to 4x5, fantastic. There's different heads available. As I said, this is the black and white head. And as I turn that on, you can see we're at grade 3.5 there. And then down here, I've got my lens. This is the Schneider 80. I have a bunch of lenses. Again, I bought this used. I think this one was probably $1,000 used. And I've got a timer over on the right there, and also the the mechanism to run the actual enlarger. So now, when you buy things used, the person selling it probably throws everything in that they have. So I've got the different negative carriers, but I've also got a lot of lenses. So this lens, as I said, is the 80mm Schneider. It's a wonderful lens. 80mm, perfect for 120. I do my 35mm with it too. I just leave it on there for the most part. But I've got other lenses. I've got also a Schneider 50mm that you can see there that I could use. And I've got a Nikkor 150. So if I was doing 8x10, I would use the Nikkor 150. But I tend to use the 80 the most. I have an 80 and a 100. As I said, people throw things in, so I have a lot of lenses. I have the Schneider 50. I have the a Rodenstock 50. I have two Nikon 50s. They made a 2.8 and an f4. I happen to have both of those. Never use them. And then I've got a spare Leica 40. The Leica enlarger actually uses a Leica lens, and it's a 40mm for 35mm. And I've got two of those, as it turns out. Again, the person who had it before me, they had a second lens, so they just included it when I bought this. So this is the enlarger area. As I mentioned, I use the Saunders enlarger the most because I mostly shoot 120, and it's a wonderful product. If you get a chance to buy one used, fantastic. As I said, I'm using the Schneider lenses for the most part, but I do have Rodenstock lenses and I do have Nikon lenses. So it doesn't really matter. Either of those three brands, those are all premium enlarger lenses. Let's just say the problem with my photographs is not related to the quality of my enlarger lenses. The only other thing I wanted to show was these are my little enlarging dodging tools. So if you need to dodge a little area. The one with the purple, that's kind of a magenta filter. The theory is with that you would dodge using a magenta filter, a contrast filter, and it would increase the contrast in the dodged area. That's how we learned to do it at college, actually. I rarely use that one, but you could do it. Maybe it's the proper way to do it. I'm not sure. Again, I don't do everything the proper way. I just do it how I do it. After all these years, I just have to live with it. So there you go. It's a 25-cent tour of the my basement darkroom. Hope you found it interesting. Again, here's the wet space, trays, developing tanks, and the enlargers on the right. And when I'm doing fiber-based prints, I just clean up this area here where these tanks are. I lay towels down and I lay my prints face up, glossy prints face up, and I just let them air dry for a day or two. If I'm doing the resin-coated prints, as I said, I tend to use these print dryers that are vertical. Now, one thing I do want to mention is washing the prints. I wash prints in the tray. I had for years a vertical washer. So a vertical washer has these slots, and you fill it full of water. It's like a giant aquarium with slots with different channels, and you would put the prints down into these channels, into these slots, and it would keep them all separate. So in theory, works fantastic. But what I found was my prints were not washing properly, and after a year or two, they would go brown. And I think what happened was they stuck to the sides of the dividers, and so they weren't really getting a good wash because they were kind of stuck to the sides and just didn't get enough water all around them. So I've actually gone back to the tray idea, and I just use that Kodak siphon with the tray. I do wash them a little bit longer, but I found that the vertical washing, professional washer, actually, it just didn't work for me. Maybe it works for you. Everyone's mileage will vary. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the tour. This is one of my favorite places in the world to spend some time, and it happens to be clean right now, so I thought I would just show it off.